Today on Beyond 6 Seconds.
This experience and traveling alone, just putting on these shows, has taught me that there is a market out there. There's an audience. Like, what I'm doing is interesting. I am funny. And I kind of just need to figure this out on my own, you know? I'm not where some of my peers are, but that's because I'm on my own path.
Welcome to Beyond 6 Seconds, the podcast that goes beyond the 6-second first impression to share the extraordinary stories and achievements of everyday people. I'm your host, Carolyn Keel. On today's episode, I'm speaking with Mike Lemme. Mike is an internationally touring stand-up comedian, writer, and producer, best known for his work at the Under St. Mark's Theater in New York's East Village. Mike wrote and produced 2018's 50th and 4th, a play loosely inspired by his first roommates in the city, a married couple he found on Craigslist. The play followed Mike's 2016 15-night residency at the same theater, which he turned into his first stand-up film called Help Wanted. A former intern for Jimmy Fallon and Conan O'Brien, Mike has also warmed up studio audiences for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and wrote for Second City this week. Late last year, Mike decided to work on some new material by traveling to London, Paris, and Rome, where he performed in conference rooms that he rented. And he's documented that experience on YouTube. And that's definitely something that I want to talk about on the show today. So, Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
You're welcome. I'm thrilled to have you here as well. So how did you get the idea to do a show where you go to Europe and rent out conference rooms?
So it was completely random. So I worked in an office job for 2 years. I worked at a private equity firm in the East Village for a couple of years. And what I would do is late at night when everyone went home, I would go into the conference room and I'd workshop material to myself. I kind of find comfort in empty office space. Mm-hmm. And then I saw this playwright, Annie Baker, her last play all took place in a conference room setting. And I was really interested in the idea of bringing people into a conference room and still putting on a live comedy show. Can I be entertaining without a stage, without a microphone, without the lights? And will it be a good experience for myself and the audience? I've also been trying to work on my communication skills off stage. Mm-hmm. I feel like I've been doing stand-up comedy for so long that I got really good at talking into a microphone. And I'm just now getting better at one-on-one conversations or conversations with a group and not being on stage with a microphone at the same time. So it was a good skill to work on as a person, but also it's a cool way to market yourself professionally. I don't know a lot of people in London. I don't know a lot of people in Paris. I don't know anybody in Rome. So I didn't think I could sell out a comedy club in those cities. So what I did is I just put on the shows in the conference room, and I was getting a lot of reservations, especially in London and Paris, where the conference room shows were actually sold out. You know, they only held 8 to 10 people. So then I got the confidence from selling out those shows to reach out to actual venues. And for my last trip to London and Paris, I actually got to headline comedy clubs.
Wow.
Because I reached out to them because I was getting a lot of reservations on Eventbrite from the conference rooms through London and Paris, that I knew there was a market. There was people interested in seeing me do comedy there. It's such a weird situation to do comedy in a conference room, but it actually gave me a lot of confidence to reach out to those bigger clubs to do some shows there.
Wow, that's really creative. And I'm interested in what you were saying about how the venue of performing in a conference room is very different from being on stage. Is it different from, say, performing at a very small venue, like performing on stage in front of 8 to 10 people versus being in a conference room? Is the feel different, even if the audience is about the same size?
Well, the great thing about doing stand-up in New York City is that I get to perform every single night, but I'm still not a well-known comedian. So the shows I do in New York are mostly to 8 to 20 people at maybe 10:30 on a Monday night or 11:30 on a Tuesday or later than that. So I've been living in New York City for the past 7 years. So I've gotten used to performing for small crowds. And what you do when you perform for a small crowd, you kind of you can make your act more conversational to begin with. Mm-hmm. So to do well in a small show, you can't go up there and just perform your jokes. You got to kind of acknowledge us more of a smaller audience and make it more intimate. And then you kind of sneak your jokes in in the middle of making it conversational. So you ask the audience questions where you're from, what do you do for work, and you kind of get to know them. And then occasionally you throw a joke in that you were planning on telling anyways. So my time in New York City and doing these smaller shows on the weeknights for 8 to 10 people, 8 to 20 people, that really helped me for making everyone feel comfortable in the conference room. So I'm kind of used to performing for small crowds. So the transition wasn't as awkward as I thought it would be.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Absolutely. Yeah, in New York, there's a lot of really small venues that if you're a performing artist, whether comedian, musician, dance, anything, there's a lot of really great small group places where you can perform. So, yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Oh, absolutely. There's a place on McDougal Street called the Grizzly Pear, and it's right down the street from the Comedy Cellar. So it's about a block away from the Comedy Cellar, and the Comedy Cellar is like the ultimate comedy club in the world, not even New York. And it's right down the street from the bar I perform at pretty much every single night for the past 7 years, So like your whole life can change in one block. And it's just, it's a great experience getting to perform in New York because like there's people just starting out here. And then there's like some of the best comedians in the world are like right down the street from you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. How did you start out planning this trip? Like, how do you even know how to reserve conference room spaces in another country? Like, logistically, how does that even start out?
So I went to London in 2017 for the first time, and I had a great experience getting on a lot of shows and doing a lot of longer sets too. Like in New York, when you're just starting out in New York, you do like 7, 10, maybe 12-minute sets. But in London, I was doing a lot of 15, 20-minute spots. And I was making more money in London too. Like in New York, you kind of you pay your dues, you work your way up to get those paid spots. But in London, I was getting more opportunities for paid work. So I knew I wanted to go back to London as soon as I could. And just from producing my own shows in the States, I travel a lot. Every summer I go on a little tour, like usually a West Coast tour. I'll go to Portland, Oregon, San Francisco, Los Angeles. I even spent some time in Austin, Texas last year. And when I travel in the States, I always try to jump on showcases that other comedians are producing, but I also try to find a venue where I can do my own show. So when you jump on showcases that other comedians are doing, you're doing shorter sets. When you produce your own show, you can do as long as you want, and you make the money off the ticket sales. So I wanted to do that and also travel more as just like as a person. I want to go. I just got my passport a few years ago, and I want to use it. So I decided to go to Paris and Rome because I haven't been there this year. So I wanted to take that same mentality that I had in the States for traveling and move it to doing international shows. So basically I jumped on a lot of showcases in London, Paris, and Rome, but I also wanted to find my own venue to put on my own performances. And I knew I couldn't find like a big enough crowd. So I'm like, why not just rent some office space? I just Google search co-working in Paris and co-working in Rome and co-working in London. And co-working is so popular now that pretty much every city everywhere has like some kind of co-working space available, I think. And I just kind of emailed each co-working space to see, are they open on Saturdays? And can I rent the space from like 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night on Saturday to see if, because I want to feel like an actual going out to an actual show. I didn't want to do it on like a Wednesday at 2 p.m. because then I knew I wouldn't get an audience. So like every conference room show I did was at like Saturday night between like 6 and 10 p.m. And it was kind of like prime time.
Wow, that's really creative because I'd imagine that no one's using that co-working space at that time.
No one is. The receptionist was gone.
Yeah.
Like, there is some, like in London and Rome, I actually got like the access codes to the building and they just let me use, I was in the whole building pretty much by myself. So I didn't even have to pay to rent the place. I mean, I spent money on it, but I could just, if I was in the area, I could just walk in and put on a show, It was very, very laid back.
Wow. So then you said that you advertised the shows through Eventbrite. Was that just like on your website or how do you get the word out?
Yeah, I did Eventbrite. I had it on Instagram too. I was using a lot of like London, Paris, Rome hashtags, but Eventbrite really did well for me. And then there's a website called Evensi, I believe it's called, EVENSI. And for some reason, I was getting a ton of hits on that for London and Paris. And the great thing about Eventbrite is when people purchase ticket, or for this one, it was more donation based. So when people reserved a seat in the conference room, I got their email address right away. So I was collecting all these email addresses and through Eventbrite, and that's what gave me the confidence to reach out to like the bigger venues to put on my own shows there. Okay. And then I was going to email the people that reserved tickets for the conference room shows to see if they wanted to go to. In London, I performed at a place called the Albany, and that's like a 100-seat venue. And I was going to email the people that wanted to come to the conference room to see if they wanted to go to the Albany instead. And then I realized maybe these people were just reserving tickets because they wanted to see a comedian perform in a conference room. Oh. And I opened with that in the conference room. I was going to say, like, I was going to invite you guys to the main show. But most of them said they reserved tickets just because it was so weird that a comedian was performing in a conference room. That's why they reserved the seats. So now I think I got to do more of them.
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, it's not every day.
There's a market.
Not every day you get to see something like that.
Right.
Yeah. So which city did you go to first? Was it London?
Yes, I went to London for a week and then Paris for a week and then Rome for a week. And then I came back to New York after that.
So what was it like performing comedy in a conference room? Did it depend on the city, or were there any consistent things across all cities that you noticed?
So the first show I did in London, basically a bunch of guys showed up. There's these 4 dudes from London and their 2 friends from Scotland came, and they were already drunk before they got to the conference room. Like people pre-gamed to come see the conference room in that first show. So what I did is I did 2 shows in the conference room in London. I was trying to do 2 in Paris, but it got canceled because there were riots going on because of the Yellow Jacket protests.
Oh my gosh.
So those 2 got canceled. But then I did 2 in Rome. So each one of these conference room shows had a different kind of audience. So like the first show in London, it was a bunch of like kind of frat boys drinking and heckling. I got heckled in the conference room, which was ridiculous. I did not expect to get heckled, but like I kind of just made it more conversational. I was treating it like it was like a midnight show in the West Village or Greenwich Village on a Saturday night. You know, like I know how to handle those situations. And then the second show in London, it was more laid back. It was just a couple couples that came out. And then for one of the shows in Rome, there's a couple who just got married and they're on their honeymoon. And this was their first night in Rome. That was the first thing they did. They came to see me tell jokes in a conference room on their honeymoon. It was amazing. I couldn't believe it because the thing about selling tickets on Eventbrite is they get my contact information as well. So they emailed me to make sure it was still going on. They said that it was their first time in Rome. They've never been there before, so they were worried about getting lost. And it was my first time in Rome as well, so it was a whole new experience. And they were on their honeymoon too. It was unbelievable.
Wow, that's so fascinating.
And now they're on my mailing list too. I think they live in New Jersey, so they're going to come out to see me hopefully sometime in New York. It'd be great.
Perfect. It's funny to go like halfway around the world and then meet people who live like in the state next to yours. I noticed that happens to me a lot. It was
unbelievable. And then like, because I think in most of the cities I performed in, except that first show in London, there was a lot of people that lived in London there. But like everywhere else, it was kind of like people just visiting, you know, like they thought it'd be something cool to do while they're in town. You never know what to expect. You just meet a bunch of random people in an empty office building in a new city.
Interesting. And I'm curious, since you're performing in these conference rooms and it has more of like a conversational feel as opposed to being up on stage as a show, how do you know when the show's over? Like, how do you shoo people out of there? Say, okay, that's it. Thanks for coming.
Well, that's the good thing about having like I only rent the office space for about for 2 hours each. So like I tried to do 2 shows. So it was each show was an hour. So when that hour was coming up, I had to wrap it up somehow. You know, that's the great thing about only having the space for a certain amount of time.
Yeah. The way it ties in that, you know, you get people's contact information because they're using Eventbrite, so you can add them to your mailing list or you continue to have them as part of your fan base. That's really clever as well, as opposed to just having random people stop by. You don't always know when you're in a club who's coming by and if you can get in touch with them afterwards.
Yeah, it's a great way to just keep in touch. And especially now because they're going to remember that show anyways. You know, like you go to see a comedy show. As soon as you walk out of the comedy show, you ask an audience member, like, who's your favorite comedian? They kind of don't remember anybody's names. But this, they're going to remember like who they saw perform in a conference room.
Very good. So Paris, you mentioned that you were there during the protests, and I know that impacted your show. So like what happened with that and how did you make the adjustment?
So basically, I went to Paris and I was there for about a week and I was jumping on a bunch of different comedy shows. Like there's a great English speaking comedy scene in Paris. And there's a lot of awesome comedians who move there from all over the world and they're putting on comedy shows there. And they put me on and I had a blast. And luckily Paris was one of those spots where I was getting a lot of RSVPs for the conference room. So I reached out to this place called Culture Rapide and they do a lot of poetry nights and music nights and they let me have my own night at the venue. So I did an hour show in Paris for about 50 people because I reached out to this venue, Culture Rapide, because of the RSVPs I was getting for the conference room shows. And then Saturday comes around and there is one of the massive protests. So the whole day I thought like we were still going to do the show in the conference room because I sent out confirmations the night before. Everyone said they were still interested in coming. And this conference room was actually in like a co-working/cafe venue that was like right in the heart of like where the protests, where the marches were going on. So it was about like 2:00. The show was supposed to be around 6. And I got an email from the cafe saying that they were closing down early because of the protests, the riots that were going on. Yeah. So I just had to email everyone and say that the conference room show was canceled. But it gave me a lot of time to just walk around the city. And I watched some of the protests happening. I saw some of the marching going on. And it was unbelievable to be in that place at that time for that reason. Like I saw these protests because I was in Paris for the first time because I was going to do comedy shows in the conference room I rented. Like it was just so ridiculous.
And what a dichotomy.
Yeah. Like there's no reason for me to be there besides me making this ridiculous decision to do these shows.
Wow.
But it kind of like deciding to rent out this conference room, like in all these cities, I created some new experiences I never would have had if I just stayed in my comfort zone and didn't try to make something happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And so your conference room show in the cafe didn't happen that night, but you did still have a show in Paris. I think you said that you eventually wound up in a club. You actually wound up on stage at some point.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I did a show that night. Like on that Saturday night, I was only supposed to do the conference room gigs. But since it got canceled, I messaged another comedian that was in town, and he said, "Yeah, come by and do my show." Wow. So I still got up that night, and I ended up doing probably like 5 or 6 shows when I was in Paris, and one of them was another show I produced, and I got to do an hour, perform on stage for an hour in front of like a sold out room.
Wow. You really put yourself in a situation that, you're out of your comfort zone, you're doing something really new and different, and you're leaving yourself open to new opportunities. So if something gets canceled at the last minute, you're out there, you're looking for new opportunities or taking things as they go, and you're finding them. It's a really cool story of planning, but also going with the flow and taking advantage of any kind of opportunities and connections that you can to do those shows.
I appreciate it. Yeah, that's just what I'm trying to do. If you're already in that situation, might as well make the most of it.
Yeah, fantastic. So you were traveling, you said a week in each city, a week in London, then Paris, then Rome. Where are you staying during this whole time?
So what I was doing is I'm a member of this site called Couchsurfing. Mm-hmm. I think it's couchsurfing.org. So what I do is if I'm planning to travel somewhere, I'll look on Couchsurfing to see like who are the highest rated people on Couchsurfing. So it was kind of like Airbnb, except free, and people just let you sleep on their couch or their floor sometimes.
Wow.
So what you do is it's kind of like sales. You just message a bunch of people and hopefully one person responds and hopefully they have their couch available for you. So I kind of set up 2 different couches in each city to sleep on because you don't want to overstay your welcome when you're sleeping on someone's couch for free. So you do like 3 days in one spot, 3 days in the other, keep it moving. I just sent out messages and saying, "Hey, I'm a comedian visiting from New York. I'm going to be in Rome for a few days. I'll have to crash near your couch if you have room." And I landed, I found spots. It just took a little bit of time. You got to start preparing for that a few months in advance and just start sending out messages, especially in popular cities like that. Those couches fill up fast.
Wow. I guess in that sense, you really don't know like whose couch you're going to wind up on.
Oh, you have no idea. Yeah.
Oh,
so it's you got to read the reviews,
Yeah.
Like the great thing about the website is like people were very honest. Most people were very honest and open with their reviews. So like if you see someone that has like 100 5-star reviews and there's someone you can trust.
Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, I wasn't sure if you had any experiences that weren't quite what you expected, either with the couch surfing or, we talked a little bit about the shows, of course.
Like the thing with couch surfing is you got to read people's whole profiles because they have like random facts about themselves you need to know before you request to stay at their place. So I was in Rome and I landed someone said I could crash on their couch, but I didn't read their whole profile. Mm-hmm. And it turns out the person I was staying with was a nudist, and they like to be naked, and they like their people crashing on their couch to be naked. Okay. But I didn't realize that before I reserved their couch. But luckily, I used my communication skills to talk my way out of it, and I had a nice time sleeping on their couch.
So you actually stayed there, but you managed to keep your clothes on at the same time?
I actually stayed there, and I mostly just stayed there because I knew it would turn into a good story eventually.
Wow.
I still got to write it out and add some punchlines to it.
Yeah, so that's, wow. One of those situations that you kind of have to, as you said, use your communication skills to mitigate. And I'm very impressed that you were able to stay there and not have
The guy actually just sent me a friend request on Facebook, and I had to decline it because I know I'm going to turn this into a comedy routine at some point. So I don't want him to know about it.
I can imagine that this was an incredible learning experience going through these 3 weeks. So, I think you mentioned a couple things that you learned about building your confidence, about growing an audience and doing these types of shows. But what would you say overall were the biggest things that you learned from this experience?
I learned from this experience that there is an audience out there who they're interested in what I'm doing. The great thing about New York is there's a lot of stage time. Like you can get on stage as much as you want, especially doing open mics or like bar shows. But sometimes, especially if you don't get on late night TV or you don't get put out an album or you don't start to build an audience, you start to get down on yourself and you start to wonder, am I doing the right thing? Like, is there certain things I should have done differently? Am I falling behind my peers? Like, I moved to New York City 7 years ago and I have so many friends who have they've been on Comedy Central, they've been on Conan, they've been on Stephen Colbert, they've been on Jimmy Fallon. Mm-hmm. They're passed at every comedy club in New York and I'm not there, and you start to wonder, like, what am I doing wrong? Is my comedy interesting? Am I not funny enough? And then I think this experience and traveling alone, like just putting on these shows, has taught me that there is a market out there. There's an audience. Like, what I'm doing is interesting. I am funny. And I kind of just need to figure this out on my own, And I'm not where some of my peers are, but that's because I'm on my own path. I got to figure out my own thing. And I think being in a big city like New York, sometimes you kind of get in your head about what you're doing. And when you leave the city and you see people that are interested in what you're doing, it kind of gives you some new hope for what you're working towards.
That's cool. Yeah, I think there's a lot of room for different types of comedy and performance. And as you said, everybody's on their own path. There's still plenty of time to get towards the goal. And I think it's cool that you've sought out these experiences to really grow as a comic and evolve your craft in different ways that maybe your peers wouldn't take that approach. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, thank you. And it's great for social media too, because like that's the thing now of stand-up is like everyone wants to see your clips on Instagram and you got to find a way to stand out. And when I put up these clips from the conference room gigs on Instagram, it definitely gets more traction than some of the other stuff I put online. So it's definitely been a good way to stand out.
Yeah, definitely. And you also put together a short documentary or summary of your experience on this trip and put that on YouTube so people can see that there as well, right?
Yeah, it's called Something New. It's on my YouTube page. If you just look up Mike Lemme on YouTube, it'll pop up. And I've been playing around with it a little bit. I've been editing it some more and then putting up shorter clips to put on Instagram and stuff like that. So yeah, I shot everything on a little knockoff GoPro camera. And then I edited all the clips together myself. And then just it's something good to have. It's a good portfolio.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This was at the end of last year. Was it December that you were there?
Yes, December. And then I think I put out Something New on YouTube around Christmas time. So yeah, the end of November, beginning of December is when I was doing most of the traveling.
Okay. So it's been a couple months since then. And I know you're working on other shows here in the States. And you had mentioned to me that you're actually bringing and putting together a new show with some comedians that you met while you were performing in Paris. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was doing one of the shows in Paris with the awesome show. This guy, Sebastian, runs it. It's at this beautiful venue. It's called the Comedy Club in Paris. And I met Jean Whitney. She's a comedian from Los Angeles. And Carter Morgan, he's a comedian originally from the States who moved to Paris. And we were all on the show together. And we just started talking to each other about traveling and stuff like that. And somehow the Edinburgh Fringe Festival came up, and it's the biggest arts festival in the world. It's the month of August in Edinburgh, Scotland. Thousands of shows are going on, and it's great for comedians. A lot of people go there with their solo shows to get a lot of good reviews and helps build their career, especially internationally. And Carter, Gene, and I, like, we've never been to the festival, and we've said separately that we've been talking about it for years that we want to go. So we just exchanged contact information, and then a couple of weeks after that show we met at in Paris, we just connected and decided to submit an application to the Fringe. And we got into the Fringe. We're going to do a show every single night from August 1st to August 25th. Wow. We have an hour slot at the Caves in Edinburgh, 10:50 p.m. And we're going to switch up who hosts, features, and headlines every single night. So we have an hour slot. So one of us is going to do 10 minutes, one of us is going to do 20 minutes, and one of us is going to do a half hour. And yet we're going to rotate every single night so we can get stronger at hosting, featuring, and headlining. And it's just another thing that never would have happened if I didn't get out of my comfort zone and try to do something new with these conference room shows. Like, if I didn't decide to rent out a conference room in Paris, I never would have met Gene or Carter, and we wouldn't have applied to the Fringe. And I've been talking about it for years with comedians in New York about going to Edinburgh, and nothing ever happens with it, because everyone's so busy. But it was just the right place, right time, and we all clicked, and now Gene, Carter, and I are going to go do the festival.
That's awesome. Yeah, congratulations. That is so exciting. Yeah, and again, really taking risks and trying something different to build these new connections. That, it translates into comedy and performance, of course, but really I could extend that to any point of any type of career that you might have is, in a lot of places, there are a lot of people doing the same thing. And maybe there are people who are moving at different speeds and maybe a little bit faster or ahead of you. But, you always have the opportunity to really think, how can I stand out and how can I do something different? And that holds true for whether you're doing comedy or you're in other types of business or creating other types of art. There's always opportunities to stand out if you're creative and you take those risks. So I think that's great.
And thank you so much. And I absolutely agree. And I think it's just also being social too. Like when I moved to New York, I was kind of afraid to talk to other comedians. And getting out my comfort zone and traveling and doing these shows is like, you have to talk to people when you're visiting a new city because you have no idea what's going on. So like using those skills of like getting out my comfort zone and being more social has helped me in New York because now I'm talking to comedians I should have introduced myself 2 years ago. But I was too in my head. I was too anxious and like overthinking everything. But it's like any job, like the more people you know at the job, the better you're going to be at the job. And like hopefully you move up too because people like you. They like being around you. You could be the funniest comedian, but if no one knows who you are, then like it doesn't really matter. My favorite comedians are the ones who are like hilarious on stage, but then they're so easy to talk to and you just want to be around them all the time. And those are the kind of people I look up to.
I mean, yeah, that's a great point. I would imagine sometimes there might be that fear of, I don't want to talk to my competition, or maybe some people possibly may be intimidated by other people. But you're right. It's so important, whether in comedy or, again, in any field of career, to talk to people and get to know them and have them know who you are and build those relationships because, you've even shown it in the short amount of time that's passed since you finished this show in Europe is you've already gotten opportunities that you have been thinking about for a long time and they finally came true because you made those connections out there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mike, thank you so much for being on my show. How can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about your shows and where you're performing?
Yes. So I'll be completely honest with you. Right now, my website is down because I spent way too much money going to Europe. So I got to get my website back online. Eventually, my website is going to be mikelemme.com. I've had it for years, but now for some reason, I've had this website for years and I didn't need to have the website. But now when I need the website, it's down. So I got to get that back online. But Instagram, at Mike Lemme on Instagram. You can find me on YouTube, Mike Lemme. You can email me, mike@mikelemme.com. And all my information can be found on Instagram, YouTube, or just email me or Eventbrite. Eventbrite's been helping me out a lot. So check me out on there. And if you're in New York, I'm always doing shows. So I'm always around. Email me, follow me on Instagram. And if you have any questions about traveling, let me know.
Perfect. Fantastic. As we close out, is there anything else that you'd like our listeners to know or anything else that they can help or support you with?
Oh, yeah. Just come to a show. If you found anything I said interesting, just go on Instagram, follow me, or send me an email. And then that's the best way to support is if you send me an email, if I can add you to my mailing list so I can keep you up to date on where I'm going, where I'm traveling to, what shows I'm doing. That's the best way you can help me out is just keep in touch.
Perfect. Wow. Thanks again, Mike, for being on my podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to Beyond 6 Seconds. Please help us spread the word about this podcast. Share it with a friend, give us a shout out on your social media, or write a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast player. You can find all of our episodes on our website, www.beyond6seconds.com. Until next time.